Hi, I'm Darrin Peppard. Welcome to the Leaning into Leadership podcast, the podcast dedicated to today's hardworking leader. Join me every Sunday for leadership insight, inspiration, and a little pep talk to keep you rolling down your road to awesome. Hey everyone, welcome into the Leaning into Leadership podcast. I am your host, Dr. Darrin Peppard, and my guest on today's podcast is Zandra Jo Galvan. Zandra is the superintendent of Greenfield Union School District in Greenfield, California. And I'll tell you, if you've ever had an opportunity to spend time around her, either in person or digitally, man, she is one of the most energetic people you will ever meet. I sat down with Zandra earlier this week and we had an incredible conversation. In this conversation, she shared the most powerful story about being a little girl who grew up in the district she is now superintendent, and a story about a conversation she had with a teacher that really helped to shape the trajectory of where she is and how she is now paying that forward every day for all kids in Greenfield Union School District. Zandra is a leader, she's a storyteller, she's an energy bringer, and she is truly a champion for kids. I can't wait to share this interview with you, but first, a quick word from Road to Awesome. Have you ever found yourself in professional development thinking, how is this supposed to help me be a better leader? Folks, PD for Leaders needs to focus on leadership. Introducing High Performance Leadership Teams, a 2-day workshop from Road to Awesome. In this 2-day workshop, we focus on getting the team very clear on their shared values, direction, and mission. Getting to know the house and understanding the strengths that each of us bring to the table and how we best leverage those. We focus on how we go about getting the work done. We focus on team dynamics, and we focus on how it is that we continue to evolve together as a team. Hey, right now, it's a tough time to be a leader, and it's really difficult to grow together as a leadership team unless you're intentional. High performance leadership teams is exactly that, an opportunity to be very intentional about your team. Hey, leaders, I want to work with your team. I want to help set you up for success. Send me an email at darrinmpeppard@roadtoawesome.net or shoot me a direct message on social media. Let's get your leadership team on the road to awesome with high performance leadership teams. All right, we've now heard from Road to Awesome, and let's just keep the awesome rolling with this incredible interview with Zandra Jo Galvan. Enjoy. All right, Zandra, thank you so much for joining me on the Leaning into Leadership podcast. It is really a thrill to have you here. It's so exciting to finally get to meet you and have a conversation with you.
It's an honor to be here. I'm so excited to meet you, Darrin. Hope one day we'll get to meet in person, but I'm honored to be here with you and just admire the work that you lead.
Well, I really appreciate it. I really admire the work that you're doing in your school district right now. This is, man, what a crazy time to be a leader. And you know, some of the things you and I talked about before we hit the record button, just, you know, really leaning into those relationships and keeping your people going. And I know we're going to talk about that more later, but that was exciting to hear kind of backstage, and definitely look forward to you sharing that with the listeners of the Leaning into Leadership podcast. So before we go real deep into some of that stuff, for my listeners who don't know who you are, tell them a little bit about you, a little bit about the role you're in, what you're doing right now, some of that kind of stuff.
All right, cool. So I am the proud superintendent of the Greenfield Union School District on the central coast of California in Monterey County. Super honored to be a superintendent of a district that I grew up in. So I was a little girl coming through these schools, walking down these streets, you know, walking to the park, walking to the library as a kid. So it just means a tremendous amount of just honor to be able to serve a community that I adore. I adore every facet of this community. We're not a huge town. We only have 18,000 people, so it's not huge, but it is mighty in heart and just really given. And so I grew up here, absolutely, but my parents are from West Texas, and so all of my family are Texans, and the Bible Belt of Snyder, Texas, if you know where that's up on the panhandle there. Yeah. And so I am the baby of 6. Go figure, right? So I am a little bit out there and, loud and proud because they all grew up together. And then all of a sudden, here comes Zanny, the little baby, 9 years later. And so I had to kind of navigate through life on my own, but not without the love and support of 5 older siblings. My mom and dad are still around, so I love that they just live down the street. We bought a house for them to be close to our babies. And so my dad he's going to be turned 90 next month, and my mom's going to be 87. And so truly the relationship piece that you mentioned, just the loving of all that. My background is totally family. We're so close as a family, love on each other, and just the personalities that we've kind of inherited comes from that, just loving. Also church, a lot of church in our background in terms of like First Southern Baptist in Texas, but all of that just makes us good humans, and that's what we bring to our leadership roles.
I think that's outstanding. And that's something that, you talk about, loving on each other and about family. And I think that's something that clearly exists in the work that you do. I mean, people who are listening to the podcast won't get to see the photo, or the video rather, but behind you right now are streamers hanging in your office over your All Means All poster. And I know that that's related to a celebration that you guys had in your district just a couple of days ago, right?
Yes. So I love people, and it's a reciprocal relationship. And so my team decorated my office. I just turned, 51. And those listeners, I look like I'm 21. I know, but I am 51. So they decorated my office for my birthday, and it was just a sweetest thing ever to walk into the office and just feel the love of the people that you serve, because I adore them equally as much. Yeah, so they're streamers.
Yeah, and again, I know people you can't see the video, but no, she looks much more 21 than 51. So we'll definitely give you that one, Zandra. So I always think it's really interesting to hear, and you've shared a little bit already about growing up right there in the district that you now get to serve as the superintendent. But I mean, every one of us has this unique journey. For me, it was. I dropped out of college. Yeah, I was out of college for a year and a half before going back and ultimately becoming a teacher, and on and on into the leadership roles that I had during my public education career. So everybody's got a unique story. Talk a little bit about some of your leadership journey, kind of the origin story of how you end up in the chair you're sitting in today.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thanks for asking that. It's so beautiful to have like the experiences that we've had throughout our life, and then reflect on them and wonder, like, how did we get here? And so for me, little girl growing up in a small town, with a lot of fight in her, like a lot of drive. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something with people. Always a big personality, and the kind of the underdog, but then also like the person that would save others. Like I remember in town, like the kids getting beat up, and I would like run and like say, "No, stop! You're not going to do that. This is the way we got to support each other." And I wasn't ever cliquey. Yes, I was an athlete. Yes, I was homecoming queen, runner-up, number 2, but still up there, right? ASB president, part of like just the different clubs, but then also part of like the Latino clubs. So I wasn't really cliquish. I got along with everyone. So I can't even tell you I had an enemy in high school or in grammar school. Like I didn't. I just talked to everyone and just was like that person to help support. And so growing up in a small town, young girl, just trying to do good. So started off, going to school. I remember in 7th grade, I had a science teacher, and he loves this story. I told, him and I got into like a little bit of an argument. And, he was trying to, set me straight on something. I said, you know what, Mr. Schmidt, who's your boss? He says, well, the principal's my boss. I said, okay, who's the principal's boss? And he said, well, the superintendent. I said, okay, who's their boss? Well, then he goes, well, that's pretty much, board members. I was like, okay, I'm going to come back. I'm going to be a superintendent. Watch me. Mark my words. I'm a 7th grade kid making that decision. I come back, fast forward to 5 years ago when I came here. He was gone. He had retired, but it was just the joke. Like he said, man, you did it. I knew you would. I knew you'd come back. And you were going to, but you were my boss, but you still owe me a lunch. So it's like simple things like that. Then the other thing that made me who I am too in this journey is I remember being a 5th grade student, a 10-year-old in a class on the campus right across the street from here from my office that I can look out the window and I can see it. And my sister, my big sister, became a teacher for the first time. She's the oldest. I'm the youngest of a family of 6. And she got a first teaching job that's teaching kindergarten. And I remember during lunchtime when all my friends wanted to go play ball or do something and I said, no, I got to go visit my sister. I got to go see what she's doing in the class. And so as a 10-year-old, I would walk down and she would give me a book and she goes, here, Zanny. They call me Zanny in my family. Read a book to the kids. I'm like, for real? Like, I get to do that? She's like, yes. And I remember reading a story to kids and just captivating their eyes and their hearts and their minds with all the animation. I mean, teaching is performing. If anybody says different, it's not, right? It's performing. It's captivating kids on. And to have 35-year-olds eating out of the palm of my hand as a 10-year-old, like only doubling their age. And I fell in love with teaching at that time. And so wanting like those experiences and then going through life. I will tell you, though, it wasn't always beautiful. Those are some really positive ones. But moving into like more like the secondary world and leaving a small town of Greenfield, going to a neighboring high school, it wasn't always the best. Greenfield didn't have the best reputation. We had it's a poor community. 95% of our students today are an unduplicated count of students in poverty. And so the perception of people in poverty may mean, to some people that they can't achieve or they can't do much. And so I had a lot of adversity as well. And so I remember going to my high school for the first time as a freshman and, I always had A's, straight A's. I got into the college prep classes, but I remember, teachers not having high expectations for me, which was very disappointing because I had a lot of high expectations for me. I remember going to a community college, because I didn't even know that universities, I could make it, And again, top athlete, ASB president, all of the activities, straight A's. But a counselor didn't pull me aside and say, hey, you got this, girl. Like, let me take you to a university and show you. None of that happened to me. So I did it because I had my big sister as a role model and then myself. And I'm a coach at heart. I coach softball. I coached basketball in my life. I played ball. I played softball in college. I had to do that coaching to myself. And so it's like self-talk that we do, that I still do today. Because as leaders, as superintendents, as positions, like frontline administrators, it's hard to be vulnerable with people. It's really hard because you're not sure how they're going to receive that. But we make mistakes. We fall down. We get back up. But to me, it's like through those beginning stages of my career, I never let anyone stand in my way. I was always that confident girl that said, no, I'm going to prove you wrong. Like, you think I can't go? Like, you only want me to take 9 units? You don't think I can take 20 units in college? Like, I'm playing ball. Like, I just came out of high school and I was taking 7 periods of class and I was getting straight A's. Like, now you want me to only take 3 classes? Like, no, I'm not going to listen to you, counselor, at my community college. Like, I got this. Like, I can do this and more. But it was because I had that drive in me. Be it maybe the baby of 6, maybe it was the coaching, maybe it was the confidence, maybe it's the loud personality. But there's buttons, right? And I'll just say there's buttons that people can push on us. And it's our integrity button. Don't ever push my integrity button. Don't ever push my I can't do button. Don't ever tell me that I'm unethical. Don't ever tell me that I'm not an authentic leader, because I work really hard to make sure that I present that personality and person to everyone. And so I think that's a little bit about my journey. Yes, I've had a lot of positive, but I also had to have a lot of fight in me.
So, first off, it's an awesome journey, and I truly love that. And thank you for sharing it. You hit a couple of things that I want to go a little bit deeper into, and I want to ask you a little bit more about. You talked about when you left, Greenfield, and we're somewhere else, and then so you get to hear the outsider's perspective of that community, your community where you grew up, and obviously where you are again. I think, and part of this is an equity piece where we're trying to ensure. I mean, the sign right behind your head, all means all, but. In addition to that, sometimes a lot of it is mindset, and eventually I'll ask a question. I'm rambling, but because to me it really struck a chord. So often we find in schools, and this is everywhere, a kind of a predisposition in an educator's mind or in a person's mind that, well, this kid can do this, but this kid maybe can't, and sometimes that has to do with poverty, or something to do with their parents, or something to do with race, or something to do with, fill in the blank, gender. There's so many different obstacles or barriers that people will put in their head that are not barriers for that individual. So what I want to know, or what I want to hear you talk about a little bit, is obviously it's clear, you were like, no, not happening. I will run through that wall to prove you wrong. As a leader now, and working with your leaders, because it isn't just you who can do this in Greenfield, how are you changing that mindset so that there aren't little Zannies in 5th grade believing, I can't go do that. I think I can, but others don't think I can. How are you addressing that?
Through culture. Like, school climate and culture is the money shot. It's that belief before it even occurs that it's possible. It's putting it in the universe. And so I tell you this because I'm in classrooms every day. Just this morning, I spent 2 hours in classrooms talking to middle school kids and elementary kids. And I take every opportunity to put it in the universe that you're going to college. And I'm going to give you some action-packed steps that we take here in Greenfield. Number one, I'm point blank with our staff. I tell them, you have to build them up. You have to make sure that they know it's possible. The reason I do so many things that I do today is because I didn't have that when I was a kid here. So I am changing the trajectory of every single student that I serve in this community because it was something that was missing with me. Not because they didn't necessarily believe I could, but maybe the resources weren't there. Well, guess what? We have resources now, and I'm going to make sure that they get as close to kids as possible. Here's an example. We make sure that every single child, we only live an hour and 15 minutes from the Silicon Valley. Google, Apple, Microsoft, the headquarters of everything. The Tesla headquarters are there. All of the things that kids can do when engineering, technology, mathematics, science. Our kids are sharper than sharp, and they just need to have a champion behind them to believe in them. So I'm backwards mapping those skill sets with my team. And so we look at what are the industry sectors that we're producing kids for. If the kids wanted to come back to Greenfield, so be it. If they wanted to work in our local county, tri-county areas, what would it be? Computer science, education, technology, and the healthcare industry. We know they're so tech heavy. And so what did we do? I backwards mapped it all the way down to preschool. We're going to bring robots into every single class because all means all. Not one kid is going to get it, not the gate track, not this track, the gifted track only, or the after school program track. No, every single kid is going to get that experience because I didn't have it. So we make sure that they're preparing, they're coding, they're building out robots, they're producing them. They're going to have a huge exposition in April where we're inviting our community in to watch just the magnificent, innovative constructivism, like just the brain power of our kids. And all it takes is to produce an opportunity and put it in front of them and let them take the wheel. Let them fly, let wild horses run, right? Another example. Every single student in my district goes to a university every single year because we've mapped it and I tie funding to it. Every single kindergartner goes to my alma mater, the local community college. Why? Because it's only 30 miles away and it's baby bladders. We got to make sure they make it on the bus. We can't pull over to have to go to the bathroom. So every kindergartner goes to our local community college. Every single first grader goes to our next closest university, which is the California State University at Monterey Bay. Heavy in aquatics, heavy in a lot of the marine biology. If that's what they want to do, I'm going to show you that avenue. And as well as it's a teacher prep college as well. Every single second grader goes to University of California, Santa Cruz. I know every single trip because we've built it in to the plan. So if you can dream it, you can believe it, and you can achieve it, is the mindset. That's the culture. We also, with the All Means All, we never forget our why. Every single opportunity I tell our people, here's the why behind it. We are breaking kids free from the cycle of poverty. And if we don't do it, no one else will. Every single action is intentional. When I bring in a robot, when I bring in a speaker, when I speak at the career days, when you speak at the career days, when we bring in, Supreme Court judges, court officials, lawyers, nurses that have gone through our school system to show our kids that anything is possible if they want to do that. And just Friday, on my birthday, I got to speak at the career day over at our middle school. And middle schoolers, it takes a little bit more. You know this. You're a secondary guy. It takes a little bit more convincing to tell them that it's possible. But I had some really honest conversations about racism and representation and what they might feel when they leave. And I gave them my firsthand story. I'm a brown girl, but I don't look so dark, right? So with colorism, I had a lot more opportunities than some of my brown, darker skinned counterparts. It's just a fact that the world that we live in, colorism affects people. And so I said, there are going to be some gatekeepers in your life that are going to maybe tell you that you can't. And you know what you're going to do? You're going to say, yes, I can. Call my superintendent. She's going to back me up on this. Call my teacher. She's going to back me up on this. I absolutely deserve a seat at the table. I absolutely can achieve. I absolutely can take that calculus class. Don't put me in remedial math. Give me a baseline assessment before you put me, and you think that my last name is going to predetermine my success or my zip code from the community that I come from, because I am highly capable. And I told them just like that, and they were like, whoa, really? I said, you're going to remember this, and when you go out into the world and somebody tries to tell you no, you're going to remember this conversation, and you're going to tell them, I am absolutely going to be able to achieve, because you are me and I am you. And that's the story I get to tell every single time I walk into classrooms. And I'm so proud of that, and I never take that lightly.
That is just outstanding. I love that so very much. I do know middle school well. Actually, my first 5 years as a teacher, I taught middle school science.
Oh,
and
God bless you.
Yeah, sometimes I say I served 5 years at the middle school level.
Yes.
Before moving on to high school, But you're right. And, the thing about those middle school kids is that's going to be imprinted on them. And just like your story from middle school of the teacher who, hey, who's your boss? Who's their boss? Oh, I'm going to be the superintendent. That imprinted on him, but the same thing on you. The same thing's going to happen too. I mean, that's your bamboo that somewhere later a kid is going to say, I'll never forget the day you said this. And I took that challenge. Yeah. And that's what it's all about, right? I mean, every kid, you said it yourself, every kid needs a champion. And, it's just simply reminding them and supporting them and loving them and letting them know, hey, anything is possible. And I love how you guys have mapped this. I mean, this is just absolutely exceptional, exquisite leadership to be so intentional about putting it all right there. And, hey, this isn't just for this group of kids. This is all of our kids. And I would think, I don't know if it's true or not, but people should be lining up to get their kids into your district.
We have really changed the face and the actions behind it. And I'll tell you one more thing that I'm super proud of is the master schedule too. When I first came back to Greenfield, because I grew up here, we had a master schedule at the secondary level that had extended studies. What was that? It was fluff for study hall. We had some really basic remedial classes. Like in a high school, California A through G approved, none of them would be A through G approved. None of them would get you closer to a university. We have flipped that. In my second year, we flipped it all. And again, I'm going to tell you, I had some adversity. I had parents lining up at board meetings saying, don't do that. I want my elite kids to be with the elite kids. And I said, your kids don't have to suffer for other kids to win. We can all win. And so that was the speech I kept telling him. So today, fast forward, 4 years ago to today, here's what we offer on our master schedule. Medical detectives, green architecture, robotics and design, digital animation and arts. We offer these robust courses that would absolutely be college credit worth on the wheel at a high school going into post-secondary. So I'm super proud of that because I put my money where my mouth is. If we're going to use those dollars, we got to get it as close to kids. And anytime teachers need equipment, our our green architecture, where they're redesigning buildings and such, they've got all the snap-on tools. They've got the load of the tools in there at their disposal, because we have to, like, kids need to have intentional outcomes for what they're doing in our classrooms.
Absolutely. Yeah, without question. And this is another one of those areas. I mean, this is the first conversation you and I have actually ever had. And so even though we talked about a lot of this stuff, but before we hit record, everything to do with, especially at the high school level as a high school principal, just doing everything we could do. And for us, it was creating career academies, actually coming to California and seeing what some great schools were doing and getting our kids in with professionals, giving them the opportunity to learn. I mean, and my own daughter had a chance to go through one of the academies we created, our Health Occupations Academy. She's not in healthcare, but what she learned was she didn't want to be in healthcare, and that is just as important as it is for the kid who, I know I want to be an engineer. I'm going to go through this particular pathway. I'm going to go into the green construction because that's an area I want to be, and I'm going to learn more. Sometimes kids get into those spaces. I think it's why I dropped out of college. I went in thinking, hey, I want to be a physical therapist, and discovered very quick, and now this isn't what I want, and I was lost. So what you're doing for kids right now, so intentionally designed, is you're getting them ready for when they finish high school. They already know the answer to what are you doing next. Not what are you going to be, because that evolves. I mean, holy cow, that evolves year after year after year for everybody, even for me. But what's next? I know I'm editorializing and I'm kind of telling some of your story too, but that's all right, because that is, to me, that is so critical for kids. It's just so important. Again, just incredible leadership. I love it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So there's a couple more things I want to get into before we wrap up. One, and you mentioned this when you were telling some of your origin story, you mentioned being part of the Latino Club. And that is something that has certainly carried forward for you in the role you're in now, working with, and I won't try to say the name of the group because I'm sure I'll get it wrong, but I know it's a Latino superintendents group in California.
Yeah. So I happen to be the president for the next couple years here of CALSA. So CALSA is the California Association of Latino, Latina, Latinx Superintendents and Administrators. And so it's been around over 20 years. I get to be the president. I just started my term in July, so I term out July of 2023. And it's just an incredible honor. Our vision and our mission for that organization is to increase the number of Latin administrators and superintendents within our great state. It also is our vision and mission to ensure that students of Latin descent make it into the post-secondary world and stay and graduate. So twofold mission, and we never take lightly those who have come before us. We all have a story in the struggles that our ancestors had to endure for us to have a seat at the table. And so I just ended last weekend. We were in San Diego, California for one of our annual, we have two signature conferences, one in January, one in July. And I got to MC that whole event and just really embrace about 300 people that came we hadn't been together for a couple years due to the pandemic. And just the sisterhood, the brotherhood, we were all in our own districts trying to do good work to help support the students that we serve. And most of our districts are predominantly Latin. So like in my district, we've got about 97% Latino in my school district. And so many represent large groupings of that. And our mission is to make sure that our students succeed. My district is from Mexico. Most of them come across the border and they, work in the fields. We're a very ag community, the lettuce, the broccoli, the grapes of the world, you come from the Salinas Valley, which is where I'm centrally located. And again, two things with that. Our parents trust us incredibly. In the country of Mexico, a teacher is elevated even higher than a doctor, a lawyer, or any other profession. And so that is a huge responsibility to make sure that we support our communities to that degree. But then also to give back to our ancestors. Like my parents were born in Texas, but my grandparents came from Mexico. And so I know it wasn't easy for them to cross the border and to get here to seek a better life for me and those that we were going to serve afterwards. And so I can't make mistakes. Like, I can't not be a role model. I can't take this job lightly or do something that would damage or hurt my family. Like, that's how serious it is to me. When I leave the house, I represent my family. I'm Galvan by marriage, but I'm a Zamora by family, and I can't not do good work. Again, I'm a baby of 6, and so also with my brothers and sisters, I make them very proud every day to be able to be the superintendent of a community that we grew up in. And again, representing my Latino culture is so incredibly, it's an honor. And so through that organization and me being able to lead it, I get to be the face of making sure that everyone leads that way, to making sure that we all give back to our community. And right now there's a big movement with Representation Matters. It absolutely does. Representation Matters, kids seeing a brown girl leading their district, and 98% of them are brown, that makes a difference to them. Seeing that I speak Spanish and they speak Spanish, they're not afraid to speak Spanish. They're not ashamed of speaking Spanish. It's actually an asset. But I will say this, representation matters only to the degree of what you do with it. I cannot be a brown girl in this position and say I've made it and do nothing with that brownness. Like, I have to make sure that my actions really truly represent how I want my culture to aspire, to achieve, to thrive in the world. And never do I take that for granted.
That's outstanding. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that part. I really, that was something when you mentioned that, I knew I was aware to an extent, that you were involved in that, but I really appreciate, again, that leadership. I mean, it's, the podcast is all about leadership, and you're just crushing leadership from so many different ways. And so I'll share this one too. So, folks, if you don't follow Zandra on social media, you absolutely have to. All of her social media handles will be in the show notes, but please make sure you do, because you're going to get everything from the morning workout to what's happening in Greenfield School District and the other things that Zandra's doing away from the district while out representing the district. And what I really want to get to with that is, you do such an incredible job of telling the story of your district and of celebrating and being such a positive role model, not just for the people in your community, but for the entire, PLN on Twitter. You just do some really incredible stuff. And so I'm curious, as a leader inside your district, let's focus inside the walls of your district, inside your community. Let's be honest, right now, it is a tough time to be a leader, and you could very easily feel beaten down, whether it's, masks versus no masks, vax versus no vax, red versus blue, elephant versus donkey. I mean, on and on and on, right? It can suck the life out of you, but that does not seem to be the Zandra that I see through social media. But again, back inside the walls, how do you stay and maintain that positive and continue to build and reinforce that positive culture and climate in your district?
Yeah, so I'll just start with kids for sure. Being in classrooms every day is my saving grace, because I never forget my North Star, why we do what we do. Also really important to lean in on the science. So incredibly important. I will champion masking any day of the week when it's going to save student lives. We have had grandparents pass away. We've had parents die. Fortunately, we haven't had a staff member, but we've had spouses of staff members die to COVID. So it's a true reality. And until you've experienced it, until you've had COVID or someone has died in your family, you don't understand. So I don't need to hear that, it's violating your rights. Like, you know what, your rights are going to be really violated if you pass away. And so science is my North Star also, in terms of making sure that I do whatever I can to protect the GUSD family. We have a hashtag, Protect the GUSD Family. And I started back on March 13th, way back when we went off, I am very relationship driven and stakeholder driven, and making sure that people who are affected have a voice. So I quickly put together a reopening task force with my assistant superintendent, Ms. Cortez. And we brought together a 75-member body of parents, community members, teachers, classified labor partners, and board members. We had a couple on there as well. And we dialogued about all the things that we know we needed to have in place in order for us to reopen our schools safely. Okay, we had just gone out, and so I worked out of the concentric circles. And so I talked to my board, and I let them know, here's what's going to happen. We're not coming back. We need to figure out how we're going to make sure learning still occurs and that everyone's safe and healthy. From there, I went to my administrative team and I said, okay, guys, here's what's going to happen. Teachers don't know it yet, but they're not coming back on Monday. And everybody's going to be in a psychological tizzy. They're not even going to be able to think about the lessons that they need to give the kids. They need to feel loved and protected, and that they're going to be safe within our four walls. And so that's really important. So we need to lean in on our emotional intelligence, so much to the fact that I had a book study with my admin team about EQ and how important that is to be empathetic and to understand. Then I went to our labor partners immediately, all in the same day. I talked to the board, I talked to the admin, I pulled in labor partners, and I said, labor, presidents of our unions, here's what's going to happen. I need you to know that kids are not coming back on Monday, and you probably aren't either. So let's talk about how do we put this body together, this reopening task force, to talk through some really specific things. We talked about family engagement. We talked about nutrition. How are we going to keep our community fed? I told you already, we were 95% unduplicated count of students in poverty. If we didn't give them food, they weren't going to get a meal. We talked about the instructional methods and what was going to be allowed by our governor and our state superintendent. We talked about health independently of safety, because our spaces needed to be safe, as well as our health when it came to screening and making sure people were going to be taken care of. And mind you, there was no vaccine. So this was just going to be running rampant in our community. And so all of those areas, and then we had one more. We had 6 categories. The last category was social and emotional learning and wellness. How are we going to take care of our people before we had them preparing lessons? And so we quickly leaned on our core values in Greenfield and really thinking about, and a lot of this was already in motion. So pre, post, during pandemic didn't matter. We had our true vision and mission for Greenfield because I had done that heavy lifting with our teams prior to the pandemic. So we have a strategic plan, we have a vision, we have a mission, we have core values. We have specific core values that our board has outlined for us together. We collaborate on those. And a couple of those are simple. We will not let each other fail. One of our core values, we will take collective responsibility for the success of every student. Another one is we will nurture and inspire the gifts that students bring to us. So there are very simple core values that I can rattle off, quickly, because it's just our internal belief system. And so with that, pandemic hits, we lean on that. Okay, guys, it's all right. Let's just pause. This is temporary. It's not going to last forever. At that time, we thought it was only going to last 2 weeks. I know. We're 2 years later, and we're still in the middle of it. But
right.
It's okay, right? It's okay because our teacher teams, they lean on each other all the time. So that is why I've been able to successfully navigate the pandemic, and I still come to work with a smile on my face, and others do too when I visit them, is because we're in it together. Like, we're not going to let each other fail. Any new legislation or any new assembly bill or any new mandate that the governor throws at it, it's okay. We're going to figure it out together, because I meet with labor every other week. I meet with my admin team every other week. I meet with my board almost every week or so too. And, there's nothing that we can't, challenge and take on together when you have that culture. And so that's been the success of really being able to navigate through this pandemic.
I think you hit you hit a lot of great things there, but I think, the consistency that I have seen throughout the country, the districts that have been the most successful through this process leaned on their culture. And, when you've got that culture in place and you've been very intentional and very deliberate, like you have, with continuing to build that culture, that's something that's it's critical, and it gets you through these times. So congratulations on that. So final question for you. I mean, I'd love to just sit and talk for like another 2 or 3 hours, but I'm sure people who, people who are listening, like, okay, I'm sitting in the parking lot waiting to go into work now. Can you guys please wrap this up? So again, the title of the podcast is Leaning into Leadership. So same final question for every guest, and take this where you want to go. But Zandra, right now, how are you leaning into leadership?
Oh, wow. So many things. I want to start with just the servant leadership. Servant leadership, authentic leadership. I'll go with those two. First, I'm a giver. So I'm going to start with servant leadership. I'm leaning into leadership and building networks to groom the next generation. I love helping others bring their best self to the table. I have the honor of mentoring at the national level with AASA, the National Superintendent Association. I get to mentor the next generation of superintendents, whether it's their first year on the job or if they are aspiring to do that. I was just asked this year for a new aspiring leadership that AASA put out for Latino leadership. So I get to also support culturally people who just, I want them to do good work and represent our race well. Also, leaning in on circles whenever I have an opportunity. I'm part of many sister circles that help and support each other. And so I don't kid you, if like anyone listening to this podcast wants to just, direct message me on Twitter and they want to do a mock interview or they want to ask a question or they want to just like chat with me, like I'm going to respond. I'm going to respond because I know that's important for us to make sure that the next generation has a champion in their corner too. And for females in particular, all people, but for females in particularly, leadership matters when it comes to challenging the imposter syndrome, challenging the intersectionality that exists. And women in particular are our worst enemy. When we think that we can't do it, we kill ourselves. We self-sabotage opportunities because we think we can't do it or that we aren't enough. And so leadership to me and leaning in on that is about making sure that people do feel that they can do it and they can apply, and I'm going to help you achieve that. And so that's the first part about leadership. And then the second part is authentic leadership. Don't change who you are when you become a superintendent. Don't change who you are when you become a principal. Don't change who you are when you're an advocate for curriculum and instruction. Funny story for me is I still send emails in pink font. I love hot pink. That's one of my favorite colors. When I was a teacher, when I was a coach, I would write. I would write my emails with pink font. I still do it today. Like no one is going to change me as a leader, because once you take away my authenticity, I have nothing. I have nothing left, and then I'm a fraud. So I also want to share with the authentic leadership. I still teach teachers. My jam is professional development. I love teaching. And so I still on Saturdays after school, I beg my assistant Soup, let me teach a class. And she says, okay, boss, you can teach a class. So I still show up on Saturdays for Saturday academies with new teachers and veteran teachers, even on professional development opportunities. And I teach them because that keeps me as close to the classroom as possible with that authentic leadership. So for me, leaning into leadership is being true to yourself, and don't change a title. Like a title should never change a human. It should be your actions and the way you serve and lead that should truly make you you.
That's outstanding. I love that answer so very much, and honestly just love this entire interview. Thank you so much, Zandra, for being a part and being on the Leaning into Leadership podcast. It was an absolute blast.
Oh, my pleasure, Darrin. Love you, my brother.
Man, what an amazing conversation that one was. I really appreciate Zandra being on the Leading into Leadership podcast. And, the more I've reflected since we actually recorded that interview, the more I just think about some of the incredibly powerful things that Zandra had to say. Takeaways, folks, that we should have from that interview are things like kids really need a champion behind them that reminds them on a regular basis what they are capable of doing. Zandra calls it putting possible in the universe. And I'm going to come back to that in a couple of minutes with the pep talk. But think about how deliberate she has been in backward mapping everything, the entire experience that a student has, every student has at Greenfield Union School District is mapped out, and it's intentionally planned. She ties funding to it. I mean, it's all about breaking kids free of the cycle of poverty in her district. I love the collective core values that she talked about, with that collective responsibility that every kid is everybody's responsibility, and that it's our job to grow the next generation. Once again, thank you, Zandra, for being on the Leaning into Leadership podcast. You are a blessing to education, and I'm honored to call you my friend. Thank you so very much. And now it's time for a pep talk. I want to go back again to what Zandra said about putting possible in the universe. We've all had those moments in our life where maybe somebody felt we weren't capable of doing something. Or maybe it's even us who think, that's not for people like me. I don't get to achieve at that level. I don't get to have that job. I don't, whatever. But the more we continue to put possible in the universe by that positive self-talk for ourselves, as well as positive talk for our students and for the people that we surround ourselves with, the more that possible becomes a reality. I love the phrase putting possible in the universe because it just reinforces that mindset is critical. Folks, as educators, we can never, ever, ever sell a student short based on their demographics, based on their zip code, based on what their sibling was like. And I know we're all guilty of it, but we got to fight through that. We have to put possible in the universe just like Zandra does each and every day in Greenfield. She is an incredible lesson for all of us. That's your pep talk for this week. Get out there. That's the challenge. Change the mindset. Put possible into the universe for each and every kid that you work with every single day. Thank you so much for joining me here on the Leaning into Leadership podcast. What a wonderful episode. We'll see you next week. Thank you for listening to the Leaning into Leadership podcast, brought to you by Road to Awesome. Don't forget, click subscribe, give a review, and share this with somebody who might also enjoy leaning into leadership.